from the Digital Media Center on the campus of Southern Oregon University in Ashland, Oregon. This is Ramping Up Your English, an educational program for intermediate level English language learners. Here's your host for Ramping Up Your English, John Letts.
Welcome to Ramping Up Your English. This is episode 122, and as we're producing this episode, it is fall of the year 2024. And in the United States, a lot of people are thinking about the election. Well, 100 years ago, 1924, Native Americans were first able to vote in national elections. Yes, 100 years ago. So looking at 100 years later, in 2024, what kind of voice did Native Americans have in our nation's capital? That's what this video is all about. Let's watch. For 100 years, Native Americans have been able to vote in national elections. In 2024, they are no strangers to Washington, D.C. Indian youth visit the White House to have their voices heard.
Before this gathering was started by President Barack Obama in 2015, Native youth rarely, if ever, had the chance to express their concerns to federal leaders. This gathering has only happened a few times, though. Under President Donald Trump's tenure, the gathering didn't come to fruition. And then the coronavirus hit. All of this is why Oliver Tyrell is grateful for an opportunity to talk about something important to him.
I talked about mental health issues here within the Indigenous communities, especially leaning towards Indigenous queer youth. And I've talked a lot about how being accepted and connected to your cultures can lower the suicide rates by 60% at times.
The forum is meant to foster conversations between Native youth, their peers, and policymakers.
I think being 16, everyone's shocked to do it, but I kind of feel like more people want to talk to me because they see that I'm so young and getting out there. As a young person that's doing more, there are so many organizations for Native youth that can help you out and get your voice spread. Being a young person, they know that you're the future and that you're the real solution to this. So it really just grants you more opportunities. More doors will open whenever you look for them.
The Tribal Nations Summit finds its roots in history.
In the White House Library, there's a portrait of a Pawnee leader, Chief Sharo, from his visit to the White House with President John Monroe in 1821. The artist Samuel F.B. Morris's painting, The House of Representatives, is a retelling of the chief and his delegation's visit to Congress in 1821 during a debate on U.S. Indian policy. Chief Patel Sharo's painting is an important bit of context before this White House summit. The relationship between tribal leaders and presidents was once a regular, common occurrence. In December 1923, President Calvin Coolidge met with the Committee of 100, a group of American Indian leaders. Cherokee educator Ruth Muskrat Bronson gave a speech at the event, Indian Leadership, Past and Present. Franklin D. Roosevelt, Harry Truman, and John F. Kennedy all met with tribes. John F. Kennedy spoke to the National Congress of American Indians from the Rose Garden.
I want to express our thanks to Walter Wetzel and to the National Conference of American Indians. Receiving you as representative of the Indian tribes, I'm carrying on a tradition begun by George Washington and really, in a sense, continued by every president of the United States.
When President Richard Nixon met with leaders of the Taos Pueblo on July 8, 1970, the White House picked the Cabinet Room as the venue. What better way to demonstrate the government-to-government relationship? After the ceremony signing the return of Blue Lake to the Taos Pueblo, Nixon told a colleague that this was one of the best moments of his presidency. And that led to President Barack Obama's 2009 White House Tribal Nations Summit.
I am honored to be with you today at this unique and historic event, the largest and most widely attended gathering of tribal leaders in our history.
And that brings us to the value.
Every single agency and department has to come up with a list of actions they've taken, of decisions they've made, and what the priorities are for those departments. And they have to deliver on those when they show up at the Tribal Nations Conference. So what happens is it spurs action all through the year, and it also spurs action afterwards.
The Biden administration selected Charles F. Sams III to head the National Park Service. His roots go back thousands of years in Oregon.
I'm an enrolled tribal member of the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation. I am Cayuse and Walla Walla with blood ties to the Yankton Sioux and Kokopah peoples. On my American Indian side of the family, we have lived here since time immemorial, or for at least 15,000 years. I'm also Dutch and French descent. Two of my great-grandfathers came west to Oregon in the 1800s. Despite the clarity of the National Park Service mission, there are differences in opinion about how to accomplish it. In Indian country, we expect an open discussion with the federal government prior to making decisions, not after the fact. If confirmed, I will bring this spirit of consultation to the service as director. I look forward to consulting with neighboring communities, stakeholders, local, state, and tribal governments, and members of Congress, even when the conversations and topics are challenging.
Perhaps the best way to know Sams is to see this video he produced, entitled With a Good Heart.
Dear children, to know where you are going, you must know where you are from. Our people have lived upon this land since time immemorial. Our Creator made us from the flora and fauna. Our origin story tells us that our skin comes from the hide of elk, our vision from the eagle, our hearing from the owl, our veins from the roots of the plants, and our voice from the salmon. This is how we were stood up as a human. I tell you this so you can carry forward your responsibilities as a steward of the lands you are so fortunate to inherit. You are made strong by the resources on the land because they are what created you. Our interdependency is not happenstance. It is how we maintain life and our existence. Ecological diversity is critical to the sustainability of our homelands. The land, air, and waters of the Columbia River Basin have sustained our lives and those of our relatives, the animals and plants. With the influx of new people over the past 200 years, came radical changes to the landscape. Lands were cleared of their trees, rivers were dammed and diverted. New industries brought pollution to the land, air, and water. Many of the newcomers did not know of the covenant we possess to be responsible stewards of the resources. An imbalance is upon the land in the form of climate change and loss of ecological functions. Now the newcomers recognize the potential detrimental effects past generations have caused by not being good stewards. Your journey on the land and along the waters should lead you to better understand how to restore, preserve, and protect the resources we love and need. Hopefully by now, you will have seen a great turnaround and have helped lessen the negative effects of climate change and ecological function. You must be the example, set the direction, and lead the way to help restore the land and ourselves as humans. You will be carried forward on your journey based upon the understanding of your past and the work of your ancestors. Be a good steward. The rewards you will receive from doing so will benefit not just you, but your children and grandchildren to come. Kunum nichtki, kawanach nich. And with a good heart you will grow up well. Kalau, your father.
Chuck Sam shared his thoughts with Pat Doris of KGW TV.
He's the director of the National Park Service, in charge of an agency with 20,000 employees and 423 national parks all over the country. It's given him an up-close look at the warming climate.
National parks were ground zero. We've seen a lot of that change happening. Up at Denali, we saw as the glaciers started to melt their way back and the tundra started to melt itself off, and we've had land slough off. Down in the Everglades, we've seen the rise of salt water coming in and affecting the massive grasslands down there. And so we have some of the best scientists on the National Park Service staff. If we can combine their work along with the traditional ecological knowledge of the tribes throughout the United States, we can find some resiliency and planning that will help us combat the climate crisis.
A Native American holds the office of Lieutenant Governor in Minnesota. Peggy Flanagan has roots in regional tribes, and according to APTN News, she could become the state's first Native American governor.
Democratic U.S. presidential candidate Kamala Harris chose Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her 2024 vice presidential running mate on Tuesday. If the Democratic Party wins the election this fall, or if Walz resigns, Flanagan would take his spot. Walz isn't on the ballot in Minnesota this fall, meaning he would have to wait until after the November election to step down. Flanagan is a Anishinaabe and a citizen of the White Earth Band of Ojibwe. She is the highest-ranking Indigenous woman serving in a statewide elected office and the first to lead the Democratic Lieutenant Governors Association.
Flanagan opened the 2024 Democratic National Convention.
Good evening, and welcome to the first night of the Democratic National Convention. I'm Peggy Flanagan, Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, and I am thrilled to be here in Chicago with Democrats from across the country to rally around Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and their vision for America. It's been 8 years since we last came together as a party, and I can feel the excitement in this arena. It's filled with energy and with joy. Our theme tonight is for the people. We'll hear from union leaders, civil rights advocates, and our fellow citizens. And we'll hear from our president, Joe Biden, who has been a champion for the people for his entire life. My name in the Ojibwe language is Gigi Wewadam Ukwe, or in English, speaks with a clear and loud voice woman. I'm a member of the White Earth Nation, and my family is the Wolf Clan. And the role of our clan is to ensure that we never leave anyone behind. That's why I am supporting Kamala Harris and Tim Walz to be the next president and vice president of the United States.
A higher profile Native voice is that of Debs Haaland, first elected to Congress in 2019.
70 years ago, Native Americans couldn't vote. I never imagined a world where I would be represented by someone who looks like me. Tonight, New Mexico, you are sending one of the very first Native American women to Congress. You know, if we start recognizing that Indian tribes should be a part of every conversation that our country has, we can create a future for everybody.
As the first Native American Cabinet Secretary in the history of the United States of America, she'll be a true steward of our national parks, our natural resources, and all of our lands.
I'm proud to stand here on the ancestral homelands of the Lenape tribal nation. The President-elect and Vice President-elect are committed to a diverse cabinet, and I'm honored and humbled to accept their nomination for Secretary of the Interior. My grandparents, who were taken away from their families as children and sent to boarding school in an effort to destroy their traditions and identities, maintained our culture. This moment is profound when we consider the fact that a former Secretary of the Interior once proclaimed his goal to, quote, civilize or exterminate us. I'm a living testament to the failure of that horrific ideology. Growing up in my mother's Pueblo household made me fierce. My life has not been easy. I struggled with homelessness. I relied on food stamps and raised my child as a single mom. These struggles give me perspectives, though, so that I can help people to succeed.
The federal government has long broken promises to Native American tribes who've been on this land since time immemorial. With her appointment, Congresswoman Haaland will help me strengthen the nation-to-nation relationship, and I'm honored to accept that she's been willing when I called her to accept this critical role.
As our country faces the impacts of climate change and environmental injustice, the Interior Department has a role to address these challenges. The President-elect's goals, driven by justice and empowering communities who have shouldered the burdens of environmental negligence. And we will ensure that the decisions at Interior will once again be driven by science. We know that climate change can only be solved with participation of every department and of every community. Coming together in a common purpose, this country can and will tackle this challenge. The President-elect and Vice President-elect know that issues under Interior's jurisdiction aren't simply about conservation. They're woven in with justice, good jobs, and closing the racial, wealth, and health gaps. I'll be fierce for all of us, for our planet and all of our protected land, and I'm honored and ready to serve. Thank you again.
Being nominated was one thing, but Haaland had to get approval by the Senate.
I understand how important the department is for all the stakeholders who rely on it and the communities whose economies are connected to it. I know the bipartisan accomplishments of this committee stand out in Congress. Your work led to Interior having significant resources and authorities, especially with the Great American Outdoors Act and the Public Lands Package. If confirmed, I will work my heart out for everyone. The families of fossil fuel workers who help build our country, ranchers and farmers who care deeply for their lands, communities with legacies of toxic pollution, people of color whose stories deserve to be heard, and those who want jobs of the future. I vow to lead the Interior Department ethically and with honor and integrity. I will listen to and work with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle. I will support Interior's public servants and be a careful steward of taxpayer dollars. I will ensure that the Interior Department's decisions are based on science. I will honor the sovereignty of tribal nations and recognize their part in America's story, and I'll be a fierce advocate for our public lands. I believe we all have a stake in the future of our country, and I believe that every one of us, Republicans, Democrats, and Independents, shares a common bond, our love for the outdoors and a desire and obligation to keep our nation livable for future generations.
And repeat after me. I, Debs Haaland.
I, Debs Haaland.
Do solemnly swear.
Do solemnly swear.
That I will support and defend.
That I will support and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
Against all enemies.
Against all enemies.
Foreign and domestic.
Foreign and domestic.
That I will bear true faith.
that I will bear true faith
and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation
without any mental reservation
or purpose of evasion,
and
that I will well and faithfully
that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties
of
the office upon which I am about to enter.
on the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Madam Secretary.
As Secretary of Interior, Haaland helped secure 3 national monuments.
We are here today on the ancestral homelands of the Anacostan and Piscataway people, bending the arc of the moral universe toward justice. Thank you, Mr. President, for the profound action you are taking today to permanently protect the homelands of our ancestors. Our songs, our languages, and our cultures are strong, and many people from many Indian tribes have sung and spoken in unison to protect this sacred place. Bears Ears is a living landscape. When I've been there, I've felt the warmth and joy of ancestors who've cared for this special place since time immemorial. It's a place where you can stand in the doorway of a home where a family who lived thousands of years ago left behind a legacy of love and conservation for a place that sustained them for countless generations. Stories of existence, celebration, survival, and reverence are etched into the sandstone canyon walls. Sacred sites are dotted across the desert mesas. Cultural heritage in the form of ancient pots, arrowheads, clothing, seeds, and evidence of lives well lived are as inseparable from Bears Ears as the air we breathe at this moment. Today, children learn and sustain from their parents and elders the songs, traditions, and ceremonies that have been passed down from generation to generation at Bears Ears. This is a place that must be protected in perpetuity for every American and every child of the world. Today's announcement, it's not just about national monuments. It's about this administration centering the voices of Indigenous people and affirming the shared stewardship of this landscape with tribal nations. The President's actions today writes a new chapter that embraces Indigenous knowledge, ensures tribal leadership has a seat at the table, and demonstrates that by working together, we can build a brighter future for all of us. We have much more good work ahead. Together, we will tell a more complete story of America. Together, we will conserve and protect our lands and ocean for people, for wildlife, for the climate. Together, we will strengthen our economy with healthy, resilient natural systems.
Mandy Yepaw says that Haaland's voice as Secretary of Interior is a major development. Mandy's comments were made on January 6, 2021, before Haaland was confirmed by the Senate.
It's a game changer. It's a game changer. It's something that my organization I work with, Illuminative, and then I also work with Native Organizers Alliance, which trains Native people on how to organize to get the things, policies and things enacted that they need. And really overall, all of Indian country was pushing really hard for Debs Haaland to get this nomination from the Biden administration to be the Secretary of Interior. So she's yet to be sworn in. She'll be sworn in maybe sometime this spring. I guess they're pushing it out quite a ways for some reason, but I think it has to do with Senate seats. But it's huge. It's a huge game changer because the Secretary of the Interior, a lot of people don't really know what the Department of the Interior does, but the Department of the Interior looks over national parks, Bureau of Land Management, livestock. So it's everything. It's land, it's all the animals within our land, and then it's Indians, which in that structure is a very racist. That's a very good example of like a systemic racism where the racism is integrated into the actual system of the Department of the Interior, that the same department that oversees land and animals is also overseeing Indian people, because in the time that it was established, those were all seen as like the same thing. So it's really powerful to have her in this position because it oversees lands. There's been a lot of environmental impacts at play, where mining companies and oil and gas are very much involved with the Department of Interior, because they are having to get their permission and approval to do a lot of really destructive, extractive things to the land that Indigenous people have opposed. So having and Deb Haaland is an environmentalist. So, and she's very big on climate justice. So having her head up not only the BIA, which is the Bureau of Indian Affairs, so she's really head of like all the dealings with the federal government and the tribes, and she's all going to be head of, all this land management too. So we're really hopeful that as an environmentalist, an Indigenous person herself, that she's going to really help carry on this tradition of stewarding our lands in a responsible way, and keeping these extractive industries away from our sacred places. Because there's a lot of drilling and extractive industries that want to desecrate places that are where our ancestors are buried, and where we go to do ceremony, and where we see ourselves as part of the land. And so we're really hoping that she'll protect that, and also be just a really strong advocate for these nation-to-nation relations within these tribal governments, because of that lack of education, because of these kind of negative narratives that have been woven into our American society. A lot of policymakers, a lot of lawmakers, and this was included in the Reclaiming Native Truth study that my boss did, they don't know about Native issues. They don't know about tribal law, but they're the ones making this policy and, pushing legislation through that can really help or harm Native people. And they just don't even know about Native issues and Native people and what are our important things to us. So having a Native woman as a part of that is it's a history making in and of itself with the appointment, but I think there's going to be more history made coming forth as she's able to really fulfill this role and work on these, respect these nation to nation, correspondence. Because what people don't realize too is all these treaties that were signed between the US and tribal nations, these are treaties that Americans have agreed to as well as part of the US government. These are not just, it's not like none of your business or any other person's business. These are things that as an American citizen, you've agreed to uphold these treaty rights. And every single treaty that we've ever made with the government has been broken. Every single treaty has been broken. They would say that they would stay off of these lands, and then they would come and take them, every single time. So I think that maybe Deb Haaland may be able to also kind of bring back honoring treaties and really upholding that's the supreme law of the land.
I bring my perspective, and I bring the very strong priority to ensure that other Native voices are heard.
For Deb Haaland, the first Native American in a presidential cabinet, a seat at the table comes with a weighty sense of responsibility.
I also stand on the shoulders of so many people who have come, so many tribal leaders who have come before me. In this time of climate change, bearing down upon us, that Indigenous knowledge about our natural world will be extremely valuable and important to all of us, not just the Department of the Interior.
What do you mean by that? An indigenous knowledge?
Indian tribes have been on this continent for millennia, for tens of thousands of years. They know how to take care of the land.
Through Haaland, Indigenous voices were heard in the Democratic National Convention.
Guwatsi Halpa, Duhinamet Etzakiwitsa Shuimi Hanu. In my Karis language, greetings, friends and family. My name is Kresh Turquoise, and I'm from the Turquoise clan. 35 generations ago, my ancestors built lives in the high desert of New Mexico. I am on this stage tonight because of them. While fishing with my dad and running through the desert with my cousins, I learned that we have a responsibility to take care of our planet. Donald Trump never learned that lesson. He called the climate crisis a hoax. He made it easier for big companies to poison our air and water. An American president must lead the world in tackling climate change. We need a president who understands that assignment. That's Kamala Harris. I know her record. She held polluters accountable for spilling oil into the San Francisco Bay. She defended President Obama's Clean Power Plan in court. And as vice president, she cast the tie-breaking vote for the most ambitious climate action plan in our nation's history.
In the halls of Congress, at the Tribal Nations Summit at the White House, at the head of the Interior Department, in the State House of Minnesota, and at the National Park Service, Native American voices are being heard. There's still a lot of work to do, but voices from Indian country are now part of our national conversation. And with that, we end episode 122. Thanks for watching. Join us next time for Ramping Up Your English. I'm John Letts.
You've been watching Ramping Up Your English, a support program for intermediate-level English language learners. Learn more. Visit our website at letscreate.org. You can also watch or download today's program at archive.org/details/RoadTV. Join us next time on RBTV Voices for Ramping Up Your English.